of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy ho, everybody. Coming to you cordless from glamorous Minneapolis. It's Friday night, August 28th. I got to check. 2026. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 381, if you're keeping score at home. Our guest tonight is Kenneth Abramowitz. He's been here before. He is the managing general partner and a founder of NGN Capital. And he's done a whole bunch of other things, and we're going to put him on the screen now. He's in a hotel room in New York City. I saw you there, Ken. You were really screwing with your camera. I was starting to panic.
I'm here. Very good.
Good. That's good. Hey, you've done a lot of stuff, man. So I'm going to read some of that. You're the managing general partner right now of NGN Capital. You're formerly with the Carlyle Group in New York City. You were the managing director there from 2001 to 2003. And before that, you spent 23 years with Sanford Bernstein Company. And you launched a website called SaveTheWest.com, which you write, and it's updated almost daily. And you've written books, and I'm going to put your latest book on the screen here. It's called The Multi-Front War, Defining America's, something I can't read, defending. I can't see. But at any rate, from 2002, matter of fact, basically it's going to be 4 years next month, but it's still very, very pertinent. And thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it.
Sure, great to be with you.
Yeah. So, the first thing I want to ask you, Ken, is I want to talk about Iran. So, before we started here, you said you want to talk about the difference between good and evil, and that's almost what the show is about. But specifically, how does the multi-front war that your book talks about, which of course was written way before this conflict, how does it apply to Iran specifically, if at all?
Well, in my book, I discuss good versus evil. Western civilization versus dictatorships. And Iran is one of the leading evil dictatorships, among others. I monitor communists, Islamists, and globalists, three types of dictatorships, all illegitimate, all illegal, all non-democratically created. And so within the three evil color-coded groups of dictatorships, namely red for communists, green for Islamists, blue for globalists, Iran is in the center of the Islamist evil dictatorship. And like all the other dictatorships, they vow to take over the world. That's a common trait of dictatorships, is taking over the world and destroying Western civilization, also known as democracy. Dictatorships can't stand that democracies exist because they're afraid that their own people will be infected, so to speak, by the desire for freedom and democracy. And therefore, they want to end democracy for everybody in the world so nobody knows that there's such a thing as freedom and life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so, I try to characterize the battle between good and evil, between dictatorships and democracies, and Iran's right in the center.
Ken, I had a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago who said something I thought was really prescient, and I'm guessing you agree. He said, Islam is not a religion, it's a culture. And I think Americans, I'm assuming you agree with me, and this is maybe where the problem starts, but I don't know how it develops, that we want to give freedom of religion to everyone, and yet the Islamists who come over to the United States, for many of them, they're not here for religious freedom. They're here, like you said, to take over the country. So how do we for the problem, as I see it, is you have a bunch of people coming from other parts of the world who are literally trying to take over America using American values like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. How do we combat that?
Yes, well, the terminology I use is similar to what you just said, but I call Islam a 50% religion and a 50% political movement. Now, someone could say, well, what's the difference? Well, a religion is something an individual believes or a family believes and practices in their house. A political movement is when someone goes to the neighbor's house and says, oh, I believe in the following things. You better believe in the following things. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it or I'm going to kill you. That's not a religion. That's a political movement or a terror organization imposing their will on somebody else. So to answer your question, the 50% of Islam that's a religion, in other words, people believing in whatever they want to believe, is protected by our Constitution. But imposing that belief on somebody else is illegal. And so we have to criminalize the political element of Islam, and we don't know how to do it. I know how to do it, but as a society, we don't know how to do it.
Oh, well, please tell us how to do it. What do you think?
Well, by the way, political Islam, also known as Islamism, also known as jihadism, is illegal in Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt. So why is political Islam or Islamism illegal in Arab countries?
Well, I would answer that question because we can't right now. Generally, we can't tell the difference.
Yes, that's right. Because we've never spent the time trying to understand the difference between the religion and the political movement because they're mushed together. You know, it is like having a sweater that's just pretend 50% cotton, 50% cashmere. And I say to you, where's the cashmere? And you go, I don't know. It sort of looks like it's intertwined with the cotton. I can't see it. And to some extent, that's what's going on with Islam. But we have to segregate the political element, criminalize it, and start arresting people and deporting people for their Islamism or political Islam or jihadism, whatever word suits you, because it's not compatible with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. It's antithetical to the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and we have to fix that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Emirates. Now they've done a pretty good job, for lack of a better term, and I'm no expert at this, at basically coming up with basically modern Islam. In other words, you go over to Dubai, and as a general rule, if you're a tourist or if you're an expat or whatever, they will let you do pretty much whatever Western culture lets you do. Generally, I mean, I know there's some exceptions, but generally they've been pretty good about that. And so, how have they specifically criminalized Islamism?
Well, they've reformed themselves. By the way, 500 years ago, no one remembers, but there were big fights between Catholics and Protestants. And Catholics said, you have to be Catholic or we'll kill you. And Protestants say, I don't have to be Catholic if I don't want to. And that began the split about 500 years ago. So Christianity's gone through a reform like this.
Right.
Catholics or Protestants don't go around saying you have to be Catholic or Protestant or I'm going to kill you. But Islam never went through that reform process.
Well, hold it. I have to stop you for a second. I could make an argument that the reason they haven't is basically, I hate to say this, but as a culture, they're 300 years behind us.
At least, well, the Islamists, the jihadis, are 1,400 years behind us. They're from the 7th century. And so, and according to them, you can't change Islam. Whatever Muhammad said was sacrosanct. The Quran is sacrosanct. You can't change one word. They don't even discuss reform. I don't even know what reform is. And you have to follow me or I kill you. So it's very difficult to reform Islam as a whole. But certain countries like a UAE can say, look, I want to join the modern age. I want to innovate, create. I want a future for my kids. I want my kids thinking. I don't want them stuck in the 7th century. So individual countries led by very strong leaders can make that decision and get away with it. It's now time for all the Muslim countries to make a decision like that. But so far, only a minority of Muslim countries have really joined the modern age.
So the UAE, would you describe that as a benevolent dictatorship?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
By the way, they're all dictatorships. All Muslim countries are dictatorships by definition, because they don't want to listen to the will of the people. Because according to the Islamists, whatever Muhammad said was true, and whatever behavior he had was fair and just and should be emulated. So there's no deviation. So one of the reasons why the Muslim countries are falling behind the Judeo-Christian countries is because they can't change. They can't adapt to the times because they're stuck in the 7th century. So then comes a strong leader in UAE and says, wait a minute, I don't want to be stuck in the 7th century. If some other country like Iran wants to be stuck in the 7th century, I guess they can do it. I can't do anything about it, but I'm not going to run a country right into the ground.
Yeah, my mother, Ken, my mother's from the former Yugoslavia, and Marshal Tito ran that, and the people of Yugoslavia loved him because he was a benevolent dictator. And I've always said this: democracy is the second best system for organization on earth, and benevolent dictatorship is probably first. But the problem is you have to have a benevolent dictator, and most of them aren't. That's the problem.
You provoked a big issue there, bigger than you think. So let me try to explain something from my point of view. Pretend you stick your arm out to the side, to the left to the left, the right to the right. To the left is democracies, which is we the people, but they can't make decisions on a timely basis. On your right, stretched out on the other side of your body, are dictatorships, where they're run by one person. They can make quick decisions, but they self-destruct because eventually the leader makes a lot of bad decisions.
Right.
In the middle of this analogy body are corporations. And I come from the corporate world, and I love the corporate world. Corporate world is half democracy, half dictatorship. You could say they're run by benevolent, honest, benevolent dictators under the rule of the board above them, the legal system above them, unions, shareholders, employees. So I'm a big fan of corporations which utilize both democracy and dictatorship in a very functional way. I'm not a big fan of democracies on the left hand and dictatorships on the right hand, because they all have fatal flaws. But we live in a democracy. It's the best we can do. That's the way it is. And we have to make the best of our constitutional republic or democracy, whichever you want to call it. Dictatorships just can't reform on a timely basis, and they're doomed to failure.
So I spent a lot of my career, Ken, working with nonprofit organizations, and I find your analogy fascinating and also correct, because my working both in for-profit and nonprofit, the thing about a for-profit corporation is that people may disagree, but at the end of the day, pretty much everyone knows what the bottom line is, and that's profit. And that can work both positive and negative, but the thing is everybody knows what the goal is. Right. In nonprofit organizations, there's so much ideology that you have no idea where people are coming from, and nothing ever really can kind of like congeal or resolve. And I find that kind of interesting. So I'm assuming, obviously, but I'm assuming we'll talk about this, that your advocacy of corporations precludes or includes the elimination of government interference, right?
No. I mean, I'm realistic enough to know that we live in a complicated society, and corporations, 90% can pursue their interests, but 10% there's other people involved, or 20%. There's the government, there's the regulators, there's the environmental protection folks, there's the board of directors, of course, there's the legal staff, which is make sure the corporation stays in line with the laws of the land. There's unions, there's shareholders, there's voters. There's a lot of stakeholders, and the CEO has to juggle that interest and still grow and make money. So the objective is grow 5 or 10% or more a year, grow the sales that, grow the earnings that, and stay creative, put a lot of money in research, and develop the next, and the next product, and basically grow forever. They're basically money machines, and they recycle their money into good investments, a new factory here and an acquisition there. And so I'm a big admirer of corporations when it's done right, in spite of the fact that the government and others have a voice in the affairs of that corporation.
Well, you're talking. You're right. When it runs right, and I would, I'm an optimist. I would say the majority of American corporations are, and obviously not all of them, but the majority of them. You have to take all those factors in consideration. Whereas a totalitarian government, when the dictator doesn't, Stalin just does what he wants to do. Putin just does what he wants to do.
Well, take Iran. I just happened to see a YouTube on this a couple days ago. They built something like 600 dams around the country with no consideration of the implication of all of those dams on all of the other dams, and the water needs of the farmers versus the manufacturers versus just the people drinking water, and basically all the lakes behind those dams are drying out.
Yeah.
It's running out of water. It's total mismanagement.
Right.
What happens when you have a dictatorship and someone says, and people do things without the proper government oversight, you get a disaster.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things that's kind of fallen under the radar, this whole Iran conflict. The fact of the matter is that I've talked about this before, they're running out of water. Besides all their economic problems and these new sanctions we have, and the thing is, the real has pretty much collapsed, and that happened even before the Trump administration started this week. The other thing is they completely mismanaged their water. It's like that now. I mean, this is if you live over there, this is not good.
Well, that's they have a false narrative, a false ideology. I call them a death cult, but they're also incompetent. They're an incompetent death cult.
Yeah, that's right. They are. But this is the understanding. And you brought this up about the fact, and Iran is a perfect example of this. They want to take over the world. So this little country, their goal, and it's actually stated in their constitution that they want to take over the world. It's actually in there. And where do they get the balls to think they could do this? I mean, there are 90 million people, and not only that, obviously not everyone in the country is on board on this. So it's like Hitler. I've always said, if Hitler just stopped at Europe, it would have been great. He would have ran Europe. They would have had Germania, but he couldn't do that. It's not his constitution.
Well, the history of evil is that it can't be contained. In other words, the evil person is so evil that he just keeps expanding and raping, pillaging, stealing until someone stops him. And then, but I've never read a history book which says, oh, the great leader took over this country, that country, that country, and he said, that's enough. I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah, and rationally, you'd think you do that. That's the thing, if Hitler wanted all of Europe, God bless him, he basically had it. He could have just quit, but no. I've never asked you this, Ken, before, and I know that, you've been on before, but a lot of people probably haven't seen that. And talking about good and evil, this is a question I've posed to a lot of guests. So Do you think evil is a concept like like the devil? I mean, is it an exist? That's not the right word. Is it a universal concept that just exists, or do you think it's just enormous human stupidity?
Well, there is good and evil. You're getting to a very important issue: is how do you define good and evil?
Yeah,
There's many ways to define good and evil, but to keep it simple, I would say good is someone who stands up and says, I believe in the Ten Commandments. Evil is someone who stands up and says, I don't believe in the Ten Commandments. Or if you look at it from a secular point of view, good is, I believe in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Evil is, I don't believe in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. A third way to look at it is someone, again, from the religious point of view, someone says, I believe in God. Now, everybody has a different concept of what God is, but just think of it as God plus conscience plus morality, however you want to define it, versus someone who says, I don't believe in God. I have no conscience. I have no morality. I just like stealing money. I'll give you one fourth example. Good is someone who says, I believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people, minus the 90% who are criminals. Evil is someone who says, I believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for the 10% who are criminals. So I just gave you 4 definitions of good and evil.
yeah. My personal thing is, I've decided after a lot of reflection and looking around that um, that evil actually does exist. I mean, as a conceptual thing, a universal thing. But that said, the majority of what passes for evil is just intense, stupid human stupidity. So I guess I think there's both.
Well, the evil people are also can be stupid, and they're greedy, and they also can't control themselves. But right today, approximately half the world is controlled by democracies, and as not perfect democracies, but democracies, and half are controlled by dictatorships. So you could say that there's a somewhat stable relationship between democracies and dictatorships right now. Although if you went back to biblical times, everyone was part of a dictatorship. So you could say we've made progress in 3,300 years. The world is now 50% democracies, and it used to be 0% democracies 3,300 years ago in biblical days.
Yeah, and so America's been around, our or not Constitution, but we've been around for 250 odd years, or maybe if you're going to go with the Constitution, maybe 220. But you would think that in that time, this would catch on, but you're right. It has not quite completely caught on yet, has it? I mean, it's. I just find this amazing. You know, there's a thing about Trump. You know, got that famous quote where he said they're shithole countries, and I've always maintained, yeah, he said that, but he wasn't talking about the people of those countries. He was talking about the governments. Half the world is shit. We have shithole governments.
Well, it's worse. Yes, that's true, but it's certainly true for the dictatorships. I hate to say this, half of the democracies have been corrupted also. So I wish democracies were pure and simple and honest. But basically, criminals always look for ways to get rich quick. And those criminals can work for a dictatorship, where that's what all the leaders are doing, or they can work for a democracy where half the leaders are trying to get rich quick, and the other half are trying to run a country or a society or a culture. So it gets a little complicated, but it's all part of human frailty. Humans want to abide by the rule of law, but if you ever said to a human or a city or a state, for the next week, you don't have to abide by the rule of law, do you know what chaos it would be in that city or state?
I've never read it, but that's like that book, The Purge, where apparently for one day a year, anyone could commit any crime, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, that wouldn't be fun. That's never going to happen. But let me ask you. Go ahead.
It actually did happen. I remember in my younger days, there was an electric blackout on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember if it was 50s or 60s or 70s.
Was it 77 or something like that? Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But there was total chaos. I mean,
Right.
people become animals when you turn off the lights. So, you know, we think we're such sophisticated beings, But turn off the lights, turn off the food, turn off the water, and people become animals.
Oh, my late brother-in-law, Ken, said a very famous quote to me. He said, as humans, we're 2 weeks out of the trees.
Very good.
But I have to ask you this. Do you think the American government right now is falling into corruption?
No, but I think under the Biden administration that the government was corrupt to the core. And we were basically an imposter government that was a criminal organization. So we would have been, remember I said half of democracies are run by criminals?
Yeah.
We were under Biden, but then we, the people, so to speak, rose up, not rose up to fight with guns, but rose up to vote, and we voted the bums out.
They were just talking about this on the Gutfeld show last night. Do you think that Biden was personally responsible for that, or he was so far gone cognitively that he didn't know what was going on?
Well, he was part of a system, but behind him was a criminal organization. Remember I said the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are the enemies? The Reds, the Greens, and the Blues had taken over our government during the Biden days. So in other words, there were people in the Biden administration that would be Reds, in other words, communists. Some would be green, Islamists, some would be blue, globalists. And together they were running a criminal organization. The biggest example of that was an open border. They allowed 20 million people or so to come in unvetted and put 95% of the population at existential risk of criminal activity. But they did it because they wanted to get those votes in so that they could stay in power forever. So we suffered tremendously those 4 years. Fortunately, the forces of good took over, and that's where we are now. And we have to stay here. We can't allow those evil people to come back, because one day those evil people, let's say the next Biden administration, if we ever see it, hopefully we never see it, but if we do, and they say, oh no, we're not leaving power. We're in power. That's the last election. Hello, no more elections, no more constitution. We're in power, and suck it up. And then we're in big trouble.
What do you think of the rise of the democratic socialists? What do you think of this?
Well, I just wrote an article on my website, savethewest.com, on that. And by the way, people can sign up for it. It's complimentary. I write an article every 2 weeks. And I said that DSA and the Muslim Brotherhood should be criminalized, that they should be criminalized as terror organizations, even though they're not killing anybody. Because we have a misconception. We think that terror organizations blow things up. It's true. They blow things up. They kill people. But I think when you have a rhetoric based on incitement to genocide, that's enough to call someone a terrorist, even if they don't blow someone up. So when the DSA, like a Mamdani, basically says, I want Jews and Christians out of New York City, I'm not going to kill them, I just hate them. They have no right to exist in New York. I wouldn't call it genocide, but it's demographic genocide, so to speak. And he wants to turn New York City into a Muslim city. And he's from Uganda. He's not even American. He's here for 7 years, and he became a citizen illegally because he didn't disclose the evil nature of his history. We're at mortal danger. So we should not allow foreign agents to run for office. I have a little analogy joke that I fly to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and some reporter asked me why I'm there. I said, I want to run for mayor of Riyadh. Oh, why do you want to be mayor? Oh, I think there's not enough Jews and Christians in Saudi Arabia. It's like 100% Muslim, and I'm going to bring in Jews and Christians, and I think there's just too many Muslims in Saudi Arabia.
And they'd put you on a plane, is what they do.
I'd be lucky. I'd be lucky if they put me on a plane.
Well, I don't understand the stupidity of some of our young people, and maybe I brought this up the last time you were on, because this is the funniest joke I've heard in 20 years is Queers for Palestine. Like, what? Yeah, you try being queer and going over to Palestine. You try that. It's like, I don't understand where these people are coming from. I don't. Is this because we're not teaching people how to think anymore?
Well, yes. By the way, Prime Minister Netanyahu called it chickens for KFC.
Yeah, right. That's right. Same thing. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we've allowed the reds, the greens, and the blues, the false narratives, to infect our K through 12, our teachers' colleges, and our universities. Let me just step back and say something very important to summarize everything we've said.
Please.
If you want to make it real simple, remember I said we're fighting 10 commandments versus no 10 commandments. We're also fighting God versus the pagans. Just like in biblical times. In biblical times, whether it was the Old Testament or the New Testament, every chapter was a battle of God versus the pagans. Here we are 3,300 years after the Old Testament, 2,000 years after the New Testament. We're still fighting God versus the pagans. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
So even though I call it World War III, it's actually World War I. It's the never-ending battle between, as I said, God versus the pagans, or the 10 commandments, or the non-10 commandments, or the rule of law, or the rule of animals. There's a number of ways you can describe it.
Yeah, and you're talking about going over to Riyadh and running for mayor. But the thing is, the problem. I'm going to use Dearborn, Michigan, as the compliment, and that is in Riyadh. You'd be lucky if they put you on a plane. Here, you not only can you run for mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, you'll get elected. You know.
Yes, and that's why we have to start arresting foreign agents. We cannot allow foreign agents to run because there's too many Muslims in a given section of town. They will vote for that Muslim, and then the Muslim will say, okay, I'm mayor now. The Bill of Rights is gone. Constitution is gone. I'm in control, and everyone else take a hike.
So Ken,
Ken,
I agree with you, but how do you counter the people who say, well, that's not freedom. That's un-American. Well,
my point is there's freedom for all candidates if you believe in the Constitution, Bill of Rights. But by the way, go to a soccer match, just pretend, and say, I want to play basketball. They go, what? This is a soccer game. You can't dribble the ball. What do you mean I can't dribble the ball? I'm going to pick up the ball and throw it to one of my friends. So every sport has rules. Every company has rules. How about go to some nice fancy restaurant in a bathing suit? Okay, so everyone has rules, and our rules are called Constitution, Bill of Rights. And people who don't believe in the Constitutional Bill of Rights should not be allowed to run for any office.
Ken, that's the best analogy I've ever heard on that. Thank you. That's why I asked you, because you're brilliant. I knew you'd come up with something. I'm going to put your book on the screen here again. So it's The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, and what is it?
Racial strife.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't even get around to talking about China and Russia, and there's stuff going on there too.
Right.
So I want to thank you for joining us today, man. And thanks for coming from your hotel room. May I ask, why are you in New York?
Oh, I'm here for a dinner. I was invited to dinner with Scott Jennings, and who TV personality who hadn't met before. So I thought that would be good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know Scott, but tell him I said hi, would you? Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again, and we will too. You take care, right?
Great to be with you. Bye-bye.
Our thanks to Ken Abramowitz there for joining us. Always insightful. I'm constantly amazed at the number of smart people we get on the show. But, I'm a very lucky guy, and you are too, for being able to listen to these people. That's what I think, anyway. Anyway, this is the Jimcast for Friday night, August 28th. First thing I got here. You guys probably know about this because we've talked about this before and it's been in the news. So it's going to be on the ballot in November in California that they're going to ask the voters there whether they can tax, not really, confiscate 5% of the wealth of 180 billionaires who live in the state of California. Now, that was the last count. Now, here's my deal on this. I'm jumping ahead, but the thing is, you have to understand this. This is all poppycock, not because, well, it is because, the fact of the matter is if you kill the incentive for people to make money, there's not going to be any money made. Besides that, there's not enough billionaires to go around. There's only about 1,000 billionaires in the entire United States. 340 million people, there's 1,000 billionaires. Here's another statistic. This is even more frightening. If you talk about people who have assets of $50 million, that would be 1/20th of $1 billion. So now, obviously, the people who have $1 billion, many of them have more than that, but still, that's the benchmark. Talking about people who have at least $50 million, there's only 9,500 of them in the entire United States. Got that? 9,500 people in the entire U.S. that have over $50 million in assets. If you're talking about $1 million, which is not a lot of money anymore, you can't live off of it permanently anyway. That's 1 of every 20 people in the United States. 5% of the population has $1 million. But like I said, I mean, it's easy. It's easy if you work hard and save money over the 30, 40 years. You can amass $1 million fairly easily at this point. That's not a lot of money. But $50 million, well, that's probably a lot of money, but there's only 9,500 people that have it. If you start, you can't tax these people enough. So anyway, I'm getting back to the thing in California. So the way this got on the ballot is because the California Democratic Committee voted on it a couple weeks ago. Now here's the thing that got lost in the press. This barely passed. On the first vote, it didn't. It didn't pass. On the second vote, it passed by 1% of the vote. And basically, it's Maxine Waters stepping in is basically credited with getting it over the top. 1% of the vote. That was for the entire state of California, the Democratic Party. That got on the ballot. But when the San Francisco Democratic Party, the local San Francisco Democratic Party voted on it last week, it didn't even come close to passing. It failed 17-5. 22 members of the committee were at that meeting. It's failed 17-5 because most of the people on the committee, even though they're hardcore progressives, they realize it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea because, I've been, people on TikTok have been giving me crap about the fact, well, if socialism doesn't work, why don't you say why? The reason I haven't yet is because it would take me 45 minutes to explain in economic terms why socialism doesn't work. But trust me, it does not work. That's the thing. You can go on and on about fairness, all sorts of stuff. Margaret Thatcher said this best, even though it was a joke. It was a pithy comment, but in a sentence, it does basically ball up the whole thing. And she said, sooner or later, you run out of other people's money. And that's exactly the problem. Socialism doesn't generate any, economists call it technically wealth. I'm just talking about money. When most people think of wealth, they think of wealth of one person. So I don't like to use that term. But that's the technical term. But socialism doesn't generate any money. Capitalism, for all its flaws, and there are a lot, I admit, at least it generates money, which is the reason we have prevailed against pretty much every socialist and communist regime on the planet because we've outspent them. We won the Cold War because we had more money than they did, basically. So the most of the people, most of the progressives in San Francisco actually recognize this. Not all of them. I'm going to read you a quote here from a guy named Gordon Marr. Let me see. I gotta find this. Yeah, he said, "Quote: The bottom line is Proposition 40 is the only proposal before voters and on the table, more generally, that approaches the scale of this crisis. What crisis? You manufactured another crisis. We are getting so tired of this. I'm talking about the American people. American voters. You're manufacturing crisis to get more money. That's what you're doing. That's what COVID was. The whole thing. And the thing is, it's not just Democrats. Republicans do this too. The whole political class, they manufacture crisis. That's what they, and I've told you this, and I know people are laughing at me. I don't care. And that is at some point in the next 2 years, someone in the government will somehow acknowledge the fact that we're being visited by extraterrestrials. You know what happens after that? The government's going to want money to fight a war against extraterrestrials. That's what's going to happen. They're going to put up some false flag operation, or they're going to tell you that extraterrestrials are coming here to destroy Earth, and we need $1 trillion or something to fight them. That's the line you're going to get, and it's bullshit. Because if the extraterrestrials wanted to come here and destroy Earth, they'd already done it. They could do it in 15 minutes. You don't understand the level of technology we're dealing with here. These people, I'm calling them people, are so far ahead of us, it's mind-boggling. But I'm just using that as an example. The fact of the matter is, all people do in government is manufacture crises over and over again so they can justify getting money from the public. There is no crisis. None. I'm in my, maybe Mr. Marr here actually thinks there is. Maybe he's sincere, but if that's the case, he's crazy. And if he isn't, he's just lying. One or the other. So take your pick. So you can tax those billionaires, and sooner or later you will kill the golden goose. That's what will happen. Now, meanwhile, and this bears repeating too, the last Thursday, 8 days ago, the national debt of the United States, the cumulative national debt, surpassed $40 trillion, not $40 trillion. Here's another statistic you need to understand. The interest on that debt is now currently $3.8 billion a day. That's what we pay per day on the interest. $3.8 billion. And I know these politicians, they throw these figures around like they mean nothing. $1 billion is still a shitload of money. It still is. You can build a really nice skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan for $1 billion. We're paying $3.8 billion a day on the interest. You don't think that something's going to happen here? We got a really interesting thing going on now. About 6-8 weeks ago, we had my old friend Murray Sabrin on, the economist. Murray was the very first guest on our very first show number 1. And going back to Caught News, he's been on these shows at least a dozen times. So he posted, I asked him during that interview, I said, specifically, if the American economy collapses, how would it happen? And he gave a very eloquent response. That short that's been on TikTok has gotten more than, it's not just that it's gotten 11,000 views, it's still getting views every day. I'm still getting comments on this. People are still commenting on this on a daily basis. It's not run out of steam. And it really surprised me. That's the second biggest total we've had for one short ever. But it's still working. Or if you want to call it, working. People are still interested in this. So, and of course you're interested in it because yes, if we don't do something about this, the whole American economy and therefore probably the American experiment will completely collapse. That's probably what's going to happen. And meanwhile, while that's happening, we know, and this probably colloquially, but it bears repeating, young men in America aren't working. They're living in their parents' basement, and they really actually are. I actually had lunch with a family friend today who told me that her grandson is basically doing nothing and living in her daughter's basement. And the thing is, and it's not just that he's living there, he's not doing anything because he doesn't know what to do, and there's apparently nothing to do. So you're talking about a whole generation of people here, I'm starting to sense, I can't remember what I read that me actually connected me with this, but I think part of the problem here is that the Gen Zers are expecting too much from life. That it bothers them they can't buy a house. Well, I don't know a lot of people bought houses in their 20s, even 50 years ago. And also the other thing is they want a lot of these kids since think that because they went to college they should start out as a vice president of the company. I don't know where they got this idea. Their expectations are completely out of whack. Now, that said, and it's easy to complain about them, the fact is the boomers, my generation, we screwed them. We did screw them. First of all, we left them with a ridiculous amount of debt. There's that, but also the fact that um there that we probably gave them the idea, put the idea in their head that we gave them the idea of high expectations. These kids have been coddled. They've gotten participation trophies. It's like they haven't, the competition of life hasn't really hit them. And okay, and you're saying, and the socialists will tell you, we don't need the competition of life. That's bullshit. Yeah, you do. You know why? Because otherwise people won't do anything. And that's the problem with socialism. No one will actually do anything. Yes, life is not fair. Life is cruel and life is not fair, but that's the way the human condition progresses. So it's like, I'm going to move on. I've been joking about the fact that the British press has been talking about the fact they're heading toward World War III for probably almost a year. Blah, 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 blah. It's all, once again, it's all fear mongering. It was, because all of a sudden this week, one of the people in the Russian administration, the Putin administration, actually said out loud, "I don't understand why we are not bombing the British armament factories." And okay, I guess I was wrong. Well, 1 year later, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, they're now the Russians are actually talking about bombing facilities in Britain proper. And I guess that would be a war act, I guess, I always thought this was all crap. Well, I mean, I knew that there was some tension. I knew that. But the fact that the Russians would even consider doing anything about it, I thought that was bullshit. But now, as of a couple days ago, they said, yeah, maybe we will. Maybe we will do something about it. If the Russians drop bombs inside Britain, all hell might break loose. Then maybe you are talking about World War III, And the reason Russia is so pissed off is because the British are manufacturing drones, or at least parts for drones, for the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians, as Jonathan Lockwood comes on the show regularly, and he's very astute at explaining this. The Ukrainians are actually winning that war now, which is absurd. Everyone thought 4 years ago when this started that it would be 2 weeks and the Russians would crush the Ukrainians. No, not only did those Ukrainians survive, but right now they're actually winning. It's really amazing. And it goes to show how rudimentary and how screwed up the Russian army is. And Jonathan has pointed this out on this program. They use his books as required reading at West Point. And he said, he's pointed out, and he's not the only one who said this. I mean, this is true. The Russian army is still using donkeys for transportation. What? What is this, 1911? What the hell's going on? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're really screwed up. And they've lost 1 million people, 1 million soldiers in this war so far. So you got a country that's getting increasingly desperate, and Britain is making parts for them to make these drones. And I got, at this point, I wouldn't put it past Putin to bomb Britain. I wouldn't. And so you're wondering, well, how come we help out the Ukrainians too, but we are 4,000 miles away. Britain is not. I don't know how far. No, we're way farther than that. Probably 7,000. What am I doing? It's 4,000 miles right just across the Atlantic. Anyway, yeah, Britain is in the neighborhood. We are not in the neighborhood. They're not going to bomb Charleston, South Carolina, because they can't get here, or it's not feasible to get here. But Britain, yeah, not to mention the fact that the British naval and army forces are basically have been reduced to a trickle because they've ignored them financially and ideologically. So, excuse me. So yeah, there might actually. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't. I pride myself in making good predictions, but I won't predict something if I don't have a feel of what's going to happen. Meanwhile, over in Iran, now, if you are reading any of the liberal press about the fact that we're losing the Iran war, that's completely full of shit. The fact is, now I got to admit, there does seem to be a problem with the Trump administration's strategy. It seems like a kind of stall, and yeah, I have talked about in the past. I'm concerned about the fact that very suddenly, or for a while there, it looked like they didn't know what they were doing, even though they started this war, if you want to call it that, military action. But it's a war. They started on a really strong footing, but lately it seems like they've been fumbling. They seem to have got their shit together now, but that's kind of not the point of what I'm talking about here. The the fact is, this economic blockade that they're doing on Iran, it's not only that it's going to work and that it is working, it's already worked. So the rial, which is the unit of currency in Iran, that's their unit of their government unit of currency, has increased like 600 and or the inflation on it has increased like 675% in like the last couple months or something like that. It's worthless. So you have people who are not getting paid for working. Now you're getting to the point where the Iranian Guard and the Iranian military, which has always been prioritized, they're not going to get paid for working. The country has run out of money, and on top of that, and Lockwood's talked about this. He's the only person other than me who's come on the show that's mentioned this about the fact they're also running out of water, which is a real strange thing. Of course, it's a desert, but generally in the past they've been good at collecting and processing water for the public, but that's all gone to hell too. They're not so. You got people who, it's not good if you don't have water. I don't know if you know that. You might live like 5 days. So, the stuff about if you read about the fact that the Iranians are still controlling the Strait of Hormuz, that's bullshit too. Now, apparently, it's not quite what the Trump administration says. It's not completely clear, but it's mostly clear, and virtually all the ships going through are getting through without any problem. This is not going to bode well for them. Now, I understand that the reason the Trump administration probably went to this economic angle is because they didn't want a week before the interns to get pictures splashed on the American press and American TV of them killing people. And it wouldn't surprise me as soon as the midterms are over, if the regime in Iran has not fallen yet. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Then we go in and just beat the crap out of them, physically, militarily. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But this economic blockade has as good a chance as anything they're doing to completely bring the regime down. And for the longest time, Trump was saying, we're not really interested in regime change. If you watch the show, you know that I've always thought that was bullshit. It's pretty obvious that was always in the cards here. Although the Trump administration wants the Iranian people to do it, and maybe the Israelis. The only scenario I see where we might actually send troops in is to recover that underground uranium. We might have to, and then it'll only be a few thousand people. It's not going to be like a huge army. So I don't think we can do this completely hands off, but almost all hands off. If the regime falls, the Iranian people can pick it up, and the Israelis will help. So that's what's going on there. Now I'm completely changing gears here. More people now watch YouTube than American television, and that's amazing. I just think that's incredible. And we're talking about live TV, cable TV, any type of television, over-the-air television. More people watch YouTube than watch all of American television. And you'll like this. This is what the part, we got multimedia. We do that here. So here's Sydney Sweeney in lingerie. You don't think I'm playing to the cleavage crowd, do you? There she is. And the reason is because it's her birthday month, and she started. Now her lingerie line is called Siren, Syrn, and they have a sale, and she's posting pictures on the internet, and this is completely blown up, and one person She got 1,000 comments on this picture on the X, and one post that said she's bigger. She's going to be bigger than Victoria's Secret, and she is. She is, because she's figured out what people like. And the thing is, it's not just men that like it; women like it too, because women are going to go out and buy this stuff. I'm sure a few men will for their girlfriends, maybe, supposedly. And in line with that, speaking of that, and I'm not going to end on this side, penis enlargements is up like 8 times over across the Western world. Guys are getting, you can get an injection in your penis, penis injection filler to make it bigger. But the problem, this woman who does this plastic surgery in Britain said the problem is that a lot of guys go too big and then they come back because they say their partners complain. But the guys, it's like, how big can you make it? That's the way guys think. Yeah. I've done live shows on TikTok, and also let me explain what's going on here. So we're doing a show on Monday. Our old friend Don Zorro is going to be here. He's kind of like the Mike Baker of Jim Peters and Night, and then we're off until after Labor Day, and we're coming back on. Oh God, I can't remember what the date is. It's the Wednesday after Labor Day. Was that the 6th? I think. And then starting next month after Labor Day, we're going to be doing shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're doing 3 times a week. We've advertised that we've been going Monday through Thursday since we started. But the problem with that is realistically, we've only been averaging 3 shows a week. That I made a promise to my wife that until I was making money at this, I would cancel a show for family activities. And so between that and all sorts of stuff, we've averaged only 3 shows a week. So now we're actually going to schedule 3 shows a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So, and why did I bring that up? I bring that up because the penises are too big. That's why. That's why. No. Yeah, I actually can't. How did that tie into that? What was I thinking? Anyway, yeah. So we're gonna do that. Oh, this is what I was thinking. So I know. So I've done several live shows on TikTok, TikTok only live shows in their live stream, and we're still working on TikTok trying to get our actual show on TikTok right now. That we post shorts and we post what we call clips, which is 10 to 15 minute segments of shows, but we don't actually do the actual show on TikTok. We're working with them on that. But I've been doing live shows, and I think we'll have a standing live show on TikTok on Thursday nights, probably at 9 or 10 o'clock Eastern. But that said, it's hard to compete on TikTok if you don't have cleavage, which is the reason I brought this up, because this is a picture of Sydney Sweeney made me think of this. And yeah, I can't, I have no cleavage. I can't do that. So, and if you ever do doom scrolling on TikTok, you'll see a lot of cleavage, especially on the live shows. It's like, yeah, and I don't have any. So I'm going to show pictures. That's what I'm going to do. And you'll hate me for it. So yeah, we'll be back on Monday night with Don Zorro, intelligent operative, our old friend. You know him and you'll love him. Entertaining as hell. And then after that, we'll be back on the Wednesday after Labor Day, which I think on the top of my head is the 6th. I'm not sure. And hold on a second. Can I actually check? I bet I can check. No, it's the 9th. What am I thinking? Wednesday the 9th. We'll be back. So I hope you guys have a nice weekend. Please like or subscribe to the program or our accounts if you get a chance. I really appreciate it. And if you watch the clips and comments, YouTube TikTok is blowing up for us. We get enormous amounts of comments. The clips get enormous amounts of views. I mean, it's been basically our first real success here, especially because YouTube has shadow banned us and Facebook banned us altogether. So I've been fighting up until recently. I've been fighting an uphill battle, but now all of a sudden we seem to have some headway. So I'm looking forward to the fall. We're going to do some stuff. I'm not going to announce that yet, but we got some stuff going on. So I appreciate you. I appreciate if you like and subscribe anyway. I appreciate it very much. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. You folks have a nice weekend. I will see you on Monday night with Don Zero. Take care, everybody.